The scorching desert sun pierced through the cracks of the cabin walls, streaking across the dust-coated floor in jagged lines of gold. The warrior man, tall and broad-shouldered, blinked against the brightness, his dark eyes scanning the familiar. Interior. The room smelled of leather, wood smoke, and a faint trace of sage. But something was different today, and unease prickled his skin. A tension he couldn't shake. He wasn't alone. Soft sound, barely a whisper against the wind rattling the cabin shutters, made him freeze. Footsteps, tentative, careful, approached. From the doorway, the warrior rose, his boots scraping against the splintered floorboards. Hand on the hilt of his worn hunting knife, he turned slowly. There she was. A woman stood framed by the doorway, bathed in sunlight and dust alike. Her dress was white but smudged with streaks of brown and gray. The fabric clung to her in places, torn in others. Her hair, a cascade of chestnut waves, was matted and streaked with sand. But it was her eyes wide, alert, glimmering with fear, yet tinged with hope, that held his attention. "Are you awake?" she whispered, her voice quivering but clear, cutting through the silence of the cabin like a knife through canvas. The warrior's muscles tensed, every instinct screaming caution. He had faced gunmen, wild animals, and the desert's merciless cruelty, but never had he faced a woman appearing in his cabin like a sudden desert storm. His hand didn't move yet. He studied her. She was older than most women who wandered the prairie alone 30 years, perhaps, but every line of her face told a story of survival, not of weakness. She took a cautious step forward, eyes darting around the cabin as if expecting danger to erupt from the shadows. He noticed the faint dirt smudges on her pale skin, the cracked lips, the way her fingers trembled as they clutched a small bundle wrapped in tattered cloth. The scent of her rosewater, dust, and sweat mingled with the cabin's earthy aroma, making the warrior's chest tighten in a way he hadn't expected. Who are you?" he asked, his voice low, cautious, yet carrying an authority born of years in the unforgiving West. She hesitated, then swallowed hard. "My name is Tina. Her words faltered, and she swallowed again, eyes glimmering with unshed tears. I need help." The warrior studied her carefully. Every muscle in his body screamed that danger might follow her, that trust was a luxury he couldn't afford. Yet something in her gaze, something raw, human, urgent, stirred a warmth in his chest he hadn't felt since he was a boy, listening to his mother tell stories of kindness in a harsh, merciless world. Tina shifted her weight, revealing a small leather pouch tied to her belt. He noticed the faint outline of a dagger beneath her shawl. She was not entirely helpless. She had survived something or someone that had left her wandering. Alone in the desert. The wind outside rattled the wooden shutters, carrying with it the dry scent of sagebrush and sun-baked earth. Somewhere in the distance, the faint cry of a coyote echoed across the plains, a reminder that the wild was never far from human misfortune. The warrior's sharp eyes flicked to the horizon through a cracked window. Calculating the risks, he straightened, letting his broad shoulders fill. The doorway, his presence a silent warning. "Come in, then," he said, "but not a step further without my say-so." Tina's eyes widened, relief softening her tense features. She stepped cautiously into the cabin, each movement measured and wary. The warrior watched every inch, noting the way her boots scuffed the dusty floor, how her breath hitched at the sudden closeness. He wanted to ask why she had come, why she trusted him, but before words could form, a faint sound, the distant crack of gunfire, or perhaps the echo of someone shouting, drifted across the prairie. Instinct flared within him. Danger was never far in this land of shifting allegiances, ruthless men, and wild expanses. And yet, here she was, standing in the center of his cabin, a stranger, fragile yet unyielding, For the first time in years, the warrior felt something unfamiliar: curiosity, concern, and an almost imperceptible flicker of hope. He did not know what tomorrow would bring, but he knew this encounter would change his life forever. Tina sank onto a rough wooden stool near the cabin's hearth, her fingers clutching the small bundle in her lap as if it were a lifeline. The warrior remained standing, broad shoulders tense, eyes scanning every shadow, every creaking plank of the cabin, as if danger could spring from the dust itself. Outside, the wind rattled the shutters, carrying the dry, pungent scent of sage and sun-baked earth. The warrior didn't speak, giving her space, but his presence was a silent anchor, a steadying weight in a world that had abandoned her. She inhaled shakily, then began to speak, her voice quiet but firm, carrying the weight of a story too long. "Buried. I was traveling with a small caravan," she said, her eyes distant, recalling images of chaos she would never forget. "We were moving supplies between settlements, hoping to reach the town by the next week. But we were ambushed. Men came from nowhere, guns blazing. They took everything, killed some. Others," her throat tightened. She swallowed hard, trying to force back tears. "I ran. I had to. I didn't even know if anyone survived." The warrior's jaw clenched. He could see the steel behind. Her fear, the grit that had kept her alive in the face of bullets, fire, and the desert sun. Her hands trembled as she smoothed a loose strand of hair from her face, but her posture slight though it spoke of endurance, not surrender. "I wandered for days," she continued, voice barely above a whisper now. "I slept in ravines, drank from streams, kept myself hidden. I didn't know if I'd ever see another living soul. Then I found this place." She gestured vaguely at the cabin, and a faint, almost shy smile flickered across her face. "I thought maybe you could help me." The warrior did not immediately respond. He studied her, the sun illuminating her hair in streaks of chestnut and gold. He noted the small scars on her arms, the faint dust and sweat that clung to her skin, the way her hands gripped the bundle as though it contained her very life. There was no deceit here, no attempt to manipulate, only desperation, bravery, and a quiet defiance that intrigued him. "Why come here?" he asked finally, voice low, cautious. "Why risk yourself walking straight into a stranger's cabin?" Tina's eyes met his. For a heartbeat, the cabin seemed to shrink around them, the dusty air charged with a fragile tension. "Because I had nowhere else to go. I trusted. Or maybe hoped." She trailed off, uncertainty flickering across her features. Then, almost defiantly, she added, "I had to try." The warrior's gaze softened, just slightly, as he absorbed her words. He had known the harshness of the prairie, the cruelty of men who preyed on the weak, and the solitude of a life spent running from nothing but the wind and his own ghosts. And yet, here was someone who had stared danger in the face and refused to break. That resilience or courage stirred something long, buried in his chest. Tina's voice grew steadier as she recounted the details of her journey. The long days without food, the nights spent listening to the eerie calls of coyotes, the endless miles across unforgiving plains. Each story revealed not weakness but a remarkable endurance. She spoke of the marauders' faces, of the flames that had devoured parts of the caravan, of the moments when hope seemed too far away to reach. Yet she had survived, and now she stood before him, asking nothing but protection and understanding. The warrior remained silent, absorbing every word, watching every subtle movement, the trembling of her hands, the way she kept her shoulders squared, the sharp glances that suggested both wariness and quiet strength. He understood that survival was not a choice in this land. It was instinct, sharpened by every bullet, every threat, every harsh sunset that burned across the plains. Finally, After what felt like hours, he spoke. "You've survived more than most," he said, his voice gravelly but measured. "And yet, you're here. That's why I'll help you. But you must understand the world beyond this cabin isn't forgiving. Out there, danger doesn't. Ask your name before it strikes." Tina nodded, a mixture of relief and determination lighting her features. "I know," she said softly, "but I can't go back. I can't survive alone. Not anymore." For the first time since he had opened his eyes that morning, the warrior felt something shift inside him, a strange weight of responsibility mingled with curiosity and a spark of hope. Tina was more than a survivor. She was a force, a presence, that had entered his life as suddenly and unpredictably as a desert storm. And somehow, he sensed, this encounter would change both of them forever. Outside, the wind carried the scent of sage and distant fire, whispering across the prairie, while inside the cabin, two lives, one scarred by solitude, one hardened by loss, stood on the edge of a fragile alliance, bound together by circumstance, trust, and the faint flicker of something neither dared yet to name. The cabin grew quieter as Tina finished recounting her story, her breath coming in uneven gasps, hands still clutching the small bundle in her lap. The warrior remained standing, the firelight flickering across his bare, muscular chest, highlighting the rippling strength of arms honed by years of survival on the harsh prairie. His long black hair fell across his shoulders, catching the glow of the flames, and the beads and feathers of his tribal jewelry swayed slightly with his movement. Every muscle in his body seemed taut, a coiled spring ready for any threat that might emerge from the desert beyond. The weight of her words hung heavy in the cabin, thick as the dust drifting in the golden light. The warrior studied her carefully, noting the set of her shoulders, the steady gleam in her eyes despite exhaustion, and the subtle tremble of her fingers gripping the bundle. He had seen desperation before, but there was something different about her, a quiet defiance, a determination that refused to be crushed. "You can't stay here forever," he said finally, his voice low but firm, carrying the authority of someone used to command. "This cabin will only protect you for so long. The prairie doesn't forgive weakness, marauders, outlaws, wild beasts. They won't wait while we decide what to do." Tina nodded slowly, understanding the unspoken truth in his words. "I know," she replied, her voice soft yet unwavering. "I'm not asking for a forever. I need safety for now. And guidance." He studied her, weighing her honesty against the risks. Trust was a currency he could rarely afford, yet something in the raw vulnerability mixed with courage compelled him. He recognized that she wasn't just asking for protection, she was willing to fight alongside him, to learn the harsh ways of the prairie. That thought shifted something in him, a spark of cautious hope. "Then we'll make a pact," he said finally, stepping closer. Dust swirled around his boots as he moved, the golden light catching the sharp planes of his face. "You follow my lead. You learn what I teach. And when danger comes, as it always does, you act without hesitation. Agreed?" Tina's eyes widened slightly at the intensity of his gaze, but she nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "Agreed," she whispered. The warrior's lips pressed into a thin line, tension still etched into his broad shoulders. But there was a softness in his eyes now, a glimmer of respect and cautious admiration. He reached out, carefully taking the bundle from her lap, inspecting it. Inside were a few personal belongings, a worn leather journal, a small knife, and a locket. It was clear that every item was precious, salvaged from a past that had left her scarred but resilient. "You carry the weight of your past with you," he said, voice quiet, "and it will stay with you. But it doesn't have to weigh you down. Not if you follow through on this pact." Tina swallowed hard, meeting his gaze steadily. "I will," she said. "I've survived this long. I can do more." For a long moment, the cabin was silent except for the crackle of the fire and the whisper of wind through the cracks in the walls. The warrior considered her words, the strength that belied her delicate frame. She was not a burden. She was a companion, perhaps even a partner in survival. The thought was foreign, unsettling, yet somehow welcome. Finally, he nodded. "At dawn, we leave. The longer we stay, the more likely danger finds us. There's a town a day's ride from here, and from there, you'll have a chance at safety. But the path is rough. You'll need to be ready." Tina exhaled, relief mixing with apprehension. She had no illusions about the dangers ahead, but for the first time in days, she felt a flicker of hope, a chance to survive, to fight, to reclaim some control over her life. The warrior returned the bundle to her hands, and for the first time, he offered a small, almost imperceptible smile. "We leave at dawn. Rest now. You'll need every ounce of strength." As the firelight danced across the cabin walls, dust swirling in golden beams, a fragile alliance had been forged. Two lives, scarred by solitude and hardship, stood at the threshold of survival together. One had strength in muscle and battle-hardened instincts. The other had resilience, courage, and a spark that refused to be extinguished. And in that shared silence, each knew that the days ahead would test them, but also bind them in ways neither could yet comprehend. Outside, the desert stretched endlessly, a harsh and unforgiving world waiting to challenge them. Inside, the warrior and Tina prepared for the dawn, the pact sealed not by words alone, but by mutual recognition of the dangers that awaited and the trust that survival demanded. Dawn crept over the horizon, painting the prairie in shades of amber and rose. The warrior had already saddled his horse, muscles flexing beneath bronzed skin, the long black hair tied loosely with leather straps, beads and feathers swaying with each movement. Tina emerged from the cabin, her dress dusty but pressed from a restless night, her hair still tangled from sleep. Her eyes scanned the vast expanse of land before them, rolling plains dotted with sagebrush and jagged rock formations. A slight shiver ran through her. The open world was both beautiful and terrifying. "You'll need to ride close," the warrior said, voice low and steady. "The terrain can be unforgiving, and predators, both human and animal, don't announce their presence." Tina nodded, gripping the reins with careful determination. The warrior handed her a wide-brimmed hat to shield her face from the sun, and as she placed it on her head, she looked at him with a mixture of trust and uncertainty. For all his intimidating presence, bare-chested, muscular, and adorned with tribal jewelry, she sensed a protector in him, a guide who had mastered this land in ways she could only begin to understand. They rode in silence at first, the rhythmic clatter of hooves against the dry earth filling the quiet spaces between them. Dust rose in swirling clouds, catching the sunlight in golden arcs. The wind tugged at their hair and clothes, carrying the scent of sun-baked sage and distant wildflowers. The prairie stretched endlessly, a canvas of both danger and freedom, and every mile tested their endurance. As the hours passed, small moments of connection began to emerge. Tina laughed quietly when a startled lizard darted across their path, making the warrior's stoic expression soften. He glanced at her, noting the brief flicker of light in her eyes, the resilience hidden beneath the fragility. She was learning to move with the rhythm of the land, following his cues, adjusting her posture in the saddle, breathing in sync with the horse's gait. By midday, they reached a narrow canyon where the wind funneled between jagged rocks. The warrior dismounted first, surveying the path ahead, muscles taut and alert. Tina followed, wobbling slightly before finding her footing. "Careful," he said, tone gentle but firm, as he showed her where to place her feet and how to grip the reins to maintain balance. Her hands were raw from the ride, her palms blistered, but she didn't complain. She listened, learned, and adapted, proving the truth in the pact they had forged. Hours later, they paused near a small spring hidden beneath a cluster of juniper trees. Tina knelt to drink, the cool water soothing her parched throat, while the warrior remained vigilant, scanning the horizon for any signs of movement. The prairie was vast and beautiful, but beauty often hid threats. Bandits, wolves, or venomous snakes could appear at any moment. As they rested, the warrior shared silent lessons with her: how to read the signs of the land, how to follow faint tracks in the dust, how to spot predators before they saw her. Tina absorbed it all, eyes wide with concentration, her body learning to anticipate dangers she had never imagined. Each teaching was a thread weaving them closer, building a fragile yet growing bond between survivor and protector. That night, they made camp under the stars, the prairie bathed in silver moonlight. Tina sat near the fire, wrapped in a worn blanket the warrior had offered, listening as he hummed softly a low, steady tune that seemed to carry the rhythm of the land itself. The warmth of the flames reflected on his bronzed skin, and his long black hair shimmered faintly in the firelight. For the first time since she had been left alone, Tina felt a measure of safety. The warrior's presence was more than physical protection, it was reassurance, a promise that she was no longer entirely at the mercy of the world. And though danger still lingered beyond the circle of light, she realized she was no longer wandering blindly. Together they would face the Pianosa prairie's trials, its scorching days, freezing nights, treacherous terrain, and lurking threats. And in each challenge, they would discover not only the strength of the land, but the strength of each other, a bond forged in dust, sweat, and the quiet determination to survive. As the fire crackled and the stars blinked overhead, Tina dared to hope that the warrior beside her was more than a guide, that he might become the anchor in the endless, unpredictable sea of the Old West. The sun was dipping low over the horizon, painting the prairie in molten gold and fiery crimson. The warrior led the way, muscles taut beneath his bronzed skin, long black hair swaying with each motion, beads and feathers catching the last rays of sunlight. Tina followed, gripping the reins of her horse tightly, senses alert as the vast open plains stretched endlessly around them. Silence had settled over the prairie, broken only by the rhythmic clatter of hooves and the whisper of the wind through the sagebrush. The warrior's eyes narrowed. Something was off. The faintest shimmer of movement at the ridge, a shadow that didn't belong, a whisper of dust rising too quickly. He signaled for Tina to dismount, gesturing for her to stay close behind a cluster of rocks. His movements were fluid, precise, every muscle coiled for instant reaction. Before she could ask, the sound of gunfire split the air, sharp and unforgiving. Marauders had found them, emerging from behind rocks and sparse trees, rifles glinting in the dying light. Tina froze for a heartbeat, fear gripping her, but the warrior's steady presence beside her was a lifeline. Down! He barked, pulling her low behind the rocks. Bullets kicked up dust around them, thudding into the ground and wood of the rocks, rattling the horses. Tina's hands shook as she fumbled for the rifle he had shown her earlier, heart pounding in her chest like a war drum. "You can do this," the warrior said, voice low but firm, eyes never leaving the marauders. "Steady. Aim. Don't hesitate." There. First shots flew. Tina's breathing was ragged as she followed his instructions, every movement guided by instinct and his quiet commands. She fired, missing at first, but the warrior's calm presence steadied her hands. On the second try, she hit one of the marauders in the shoulder, forcing him to duck behind cover. Her eyes widened with the shock of her own success, and a flicker of determination sparked within her. The warrior moved like a shadow across the rocks, his bare chest and muscular frame a blur of controlled power. He returned fire with precision, rifle recoiling with each shot, every movement calculated to protect both himself and Tina. His long hair streamed behind him as he ducked and weaved, a living embodiment of the land's raw strength. Beads and feathers of his tribal jewelry glinted with each turn of his head, reflecting both his heritage and his battle-hardened presence. The fight was brutal but brief. Tina began to anticipate the warrior's movements, firing when he fired, shifting when he shifted, learning the rhythm of combat like a harsh dance across the rocks and dust. Together they created a synchronized force, a single unit forged by necessity and the fragile bond that had grown since dawn. When the last marauder fled into the twilight, the prairie fell silent again. Tina leaned against a rock, chest heaving, hair matted with sweat and dust, her dress torn in places. The warrior approached, scanning the horizon one last time before giving a single nod. "You did well," he said quietly. "Not many survive an encounter like that, let alone fight. Back. You're stronger than you realize." She met his gaze, relief mingling with newfound confidence. "I couldn't have done it without you," she admitted, her voice soft but steady. He allowed himself a small, almost imperceptible smile. "The first since dawn." "No," he said. "You did it because you chose to. And that's the difference between those who survive and those who perish on this land." The wind shifted, carrying the scent of dry sage, sweat, and sun-baked earth. The prairie was vast, unforgiving, and full of unseen threats, but for the first time, Tina felt not just fear, but empowerment. And the warrior, standing beside her with vigilant eyes and unwavering strength, recognized that the pact they had formed was no longer just about survival, it was about trust, partnership, and the quiet knowledge that together they could face the dangers of the Old West. As night fell, they mounted their horses once more, riding slowly toward a distant ridge where safety might wait. Their movements were cautious, coordinated, a dance of survival in a world where death could strike at any moment. And beneath the fading sun and rising stars, a fragile bond had solidified, one forged in blood, dust, and the shared courage to face whatever storms the prairie might bring. The night had settled like a velvet blanket over the prairie, stars glimmering cold and distant. The warrior led Tina cautiously, moving along a narrow rocky trail that snaked through the rugged foothills. His bare chest glowed faintly in the moonlight, muscles taut and coiled like springs, long black hair streaming behind him, beads and feathers swaying with each step. Tina followed closely, clutching the reins, her eyes wide in both awe and apprehension at the vast, silent expanse. Around them, the attack from earlier had left both of them on edge. Tina's hands were still shaky, but she rode with a growing confidence, following the warrior's lead as he navigated the dangerous terrain. The canyon ahead promised shelter, but it was narrow, shadowed, and fraught with hidden threats. Every footfall on the rocky path echoed, the silence of the night amplifying even the faintest sound. "Keep close," the warrior whispered, his deep voice barely audible over the soft rustle of the wind. "The canyon hides more than just shelter. Predators and men with ill intentions lurk where you least expect." Tina swallowed hard, nodding. Her trust in him had grown, strengthened by the pact they had formed, but the wilderness was unforgiving. She had survived marauders, desert heat, and her own fear, but now she understood the breadth of what lay ahead. Survival demanded more than courage. It demanded attention, intuition, and the ability to act before danger struck as they descended. Into the canyon, the moonlight revealed jagged cliffs rising sharply on either side. Shadows twisted in unnatural forms, and every rustle of leaves or shift of stone set Tina's heart racing. The warrior moved with the grace of a predator, silent and measured, eyes scanning every corner, nostrils flaring faintly as he took in the scents of the canyon. His presence was a shield, his strength a promise of protection, yet he never forced himself upon her space, only guided, corrected, and occasionally placed a steady hand near hers to direct her movements. Suddenly, a faint metallic clink echoed. From the shadows, the warrior froze, eyes narrowing as he signaled Tina to halt. She pressed herself against the rocks, heartbeat hammering, hands trembling but steadying around the reins. A pair of figures emerged, moving cautiously, weapons in hand. Bandits. Their faces masked, eyes glinting in the moonlight, searching for prey. The warrior stepped forward, chest bare and glistening, long black hair framing his sharp, determined features. Feathers and beads in his hair and around his wrists caught the moonlight, a striking emblem of power and heritage. His voice, low and commanding, carried through the canyon. "Leave now or face consequences." The bandits hesitated. Few men had faced him and lived to speak of it. His reputation, earned in battles across the plains, radiated through his stance, the subtle shifting of muscles and the intensity of his gaze. Tina watched, awe and admiration mixing with fear, as he moved fluidly, rifle ready, body coiled like a panther prepared to strike. A sudden movement, a bandit lunging forward, was met with the warrior's swift reaction. He struck with precision, disarming the man in a fluid motion, sending a warning ripple through the others. Tina, following his movements, found herself mirroring his grace under pressure, instinctively shifting, ducking, and preparing to react if needed. Her confidence surged not because she had lost fear, but because she trusted the warrior to guide her, and she trusted herself to act out after a tense moment. The bandits retreated, disappearing into the night like shadows swallowed by darkness. Tina exhaled, muscles trembling but heart alight with adrenaline. The warrior lowered his weapon, eyes scanning the canyon one last time before meeting her gaze. "You did well," he said quietly, voice softer now, carrying a rare note of pride. "You're learning faster than I expected. Strength isn't just muscle, it's courage, focus, and the will to survive. You have all three." Tina's chest heaved with exhaustion and relief. I couldn't have done it without you," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. He shook his head, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "No, you did it. I only guided you." As they settled near a small hidden spring within the canyon, the water reflecting the moonlight, a fragile sense of security enveloped them. The prairie outside remained dangerous and unpredictable, but for the first time since their journey began, Tina felt a real measure of hope. And the warrior, standing beside her, recognized a rare bond forming, one born not just from survival, but from trust, mutual respect, and the unspoken knowledge that they were no longer alone in facing the wild, ruthless world of the Old West. The first light of dawn painted the prairie in soft golds and pinks, illuminating the rugged landscape with a gentle warmth. The warrior adjusted the straps of his horse, his bare, muscular chest gleaming with sweat and the soft glow of morning. His long black hair, adorned with beads and feathers, shifted with the breeze, and his dark eyes scanned the horizon with quiet vigilance. Beside him, Tina mounted her horse with practiced care, the dusty, slightly torn white dress clinging to her form, but her posture now confident, her fear tempered by the trials of the journey. They had navigated treacherous canyons, evaded marauders, and survived the harsh, sun-scorched plains. Yet, there remained one last stretch before they reached the safety of the distant town. The warrior led the way, muscles coiled and senses alert. But beneath the tension, there was a subtle shift to lightness born from the bond forged through shared danger and trust. Tina had grown more than he expected, her courage now visible in every deliberate movement, every measured glance at the world around her. As they crested a low ridge, the prairie stretched endlessly before them, dotted with wildflowers and grazing horses. And there, standing in the soft morning haze, was the sight that stole Tina's breath and made the warrior pause. A small encampment lay ahead, smoke curling from a hearth, with figures moving among wagons and horses. And at the center of the gathering stood a man of authority and warmth, a white-haired rancher with kind eyes waving toward them. "Tina!" the man called, voice carrying across the plain. Relief and joy flooded her expression. She realized with an almost dizzying rush of emotion that she had reached safety at last. The warrior dismounted, helping her carefully to the ground. His eyes, dark and unreadable, studied her reaction as though measuring the value of what had been won through their ordeal. The rancher approached, embracing Tina with genuine relief. "I feared the worst," he said, voice choked. "They told me the plains were perilous, but I never imagined you'd survive this long alone." Tina smiled, tears prickling her eyes. "I wasn't alone," she whispered, glancing at the warrior whose presence had been her shield and guide. The warrior nodded, acknowledging her words without pride, his expression softening. He had never sought reward, nor recognition. Survival and honor were enough. But as Tina turned to him, her eyes glimmering with gratitude, he felt an unfamiliar warmth stir in his chest. "You've done more than survive," she said softly. "You saved me, taught me, protected me, and for that I am forever indebted. You've given me something I thought was lost forever, hope." The warrior's lips pressed into a thin line, almost a smile. He had known hardship, solitude, and danger, but never the quiet satisfaction of a life preserved not through strength alone, but through trust and partnership. The bond between them, forged in dust, sweat, and fear, had become something unspoken yet profoundly understood. Tina's gaze lingered on him, appreciation and something deeper hidden in the warmth of her eyes. Slowly, she reached out, touching his arm, a gesture of acknowledgement and respect, a human connection that transcended words. The warrior, still alert to the prairie around them, felt an unusual calm settle over him. For the first time in years, he sensed that the path forward, though uncertain, was no longer walked alone. The rancher stepped closer, gesturing to the encampment. "You're safe now, both of you. Rest, eat, and regain your strength. Then the world can wait." Tina turned toward the warrior, a quiet determination in her voice. "I couldn't have made it here without you. Whatever comes next, I want you there too." For a long moment, the warrior remained silent, considering the offer. Adventure and danger had shaped him, yet this gesture, this invitation to remain close, hinted at a different kind of reward, one he had never anticipated. Finally, he nodded, a hint of a smile softening his rugged features. "Then we ride together," he said, voice low but certain. As the sun rose higher, the trio moved toward the encampment, the golden light bathing their path. The prairie, once vast and unforgiving, now seemed full of possibility. Tina had survived, grown stronger, and discovered a protector and ally in the warrior. And for him, the reward was unexpected yet profound, a companion, a witness to his life and strength, and perhaps, in time, something more. The wind whispered across the plains, carrying the promise of safety, new beginnings, and a bond forged in the harshest trials of the Old West. In the end, the warrior had woken to find not just a reward of gratitude and life preserved, but the quiet, enduring presence of someone who would ride alongside him through whatever storms remained to come.